I hope everybody's having a great Friday. It was warm here in Colorado, not too warm. It was 41 degrees here in the Denver metro, but it was enjoyable to have the sun out and a nice sunny day. So I hope everybody's having a good Friday. I just wanted to jump on here and just share with everyone that the response to Columbia Avenue, my memoir that I just published on the 20th last week, has been phenomenal, and I'm truly touched and just humbled by it. And just want to say that I thank everybody who has supported it. And I think that it's just been so well received at this time because understanding grief is something that the world seems to need today. I've been kind of deliberating as to why God has kind of pushed me to pursue this project and move forth and publish this project. And I think it's because we're grieving. The recent statistics 500,000 people have passed away in America from coronavirus, and that's even touched my family as well. And this is a particular story of grief. My memoir is about stillborn experience, but I share really just one survivor's point of view of how to walk through grief. I'm not a doctor. I have mastered counseling and I have some education, but I am not a doctor. Really, I am a survivor of grief. But in America, we don't talk about grief a lot. We don't read about grief a lot. We don't really know how to respond with our grief experience a lot. And that's why I was pushed originally to write this book back in 2014 and 2015. And so I just wanted to share that this is a hopeful story. It's painful in the beginning, but as you walk through the entire pages of the book, it turns into a hopeful and supportive outlook on how we can manage grief from my own learned experiences from walking through my own grief experience. And so I wanted to share really what that looked like for me was similar to a 12-step program in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it just paralleled with me and it just connected me to how to walk through your grief experience. And so I just want to share that with you. In Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a 12-step program. And for each step, I believe that there's a grief step on really what we should consider, what our mindfulness should be, what our perspective should be, what it was for me, and how it helped me to manage my grief and even manage it today. The first step in Alcoholics Anonymous is that you have to admit that you're powerless over that substance, that your life has become unmanageable. And in the same way, for grief, I believe that you have to submit to grief suffering, abandon your ego, and submit to the crazy. A lot of times when I was grieving, I would feel like I was going crazy, like I was crazy, like there was a spotlight just on my life, and I just remember it would drive me crazy. But we just keep moving in America. That's how we normally respond and behave in situations, is that we just keep moving, but there's power in stillness. What I've learned is that when you are truly in pain, when your soul is truly crying out, the best thing that you can do is submit to that moment, submit to that feeling, and submit to that process. And it has to surrender your will to fight against it. Because the truth is, the longer that you fight against it, the longer you try to avoid it, the longer that pain is going to be there. That pain, it has to be dealt with. And so that first step is just submitting to that suffering. There are 7 steps in grief. There are 7 steps that we learn about in psychology when it comes to a grieving experience. And but for me, you just have to submit to that first step is just submitting to that pain and submitting to that suffering and submitting to the crazy. You have to be able to kind of walk through that moment and experience the calling of that darkness and the calling of that suffering, and just mourn. It's okay just to be still and just to mourn for a moment, and to just reflect on all the happy times, but all that you had dreamed for, the brokenness and the loss of those dreams, really just to submit to the unmanagement of it, to try and gain the perspective and the mindfulness to be able to manage it. So that's the first step. You just have to submit to your suffering in the moment. The second step is that, in Alcoholics Anonymous, from, just my learning in psychology and helping those who are in substance abuse, is that you have to come to believe that there's a power greater than yourself that can restore you to sanity. Grief is the same way. I had to surrender to God all of my suffering. I had to pray for His strength, for His wisdom, and for His guidance. It literally brought me to my knees. It brought me to my knees. It physically, I was weak. My mind was weak. My spirit was weak. And I needed a power that was greater than myself to be able to pick myself back up again. That was just so that I could survive. I remember that I had to go to work. I had to return to work just 3 weeks after we buried our son. Just 3 weeks after we buried him, I had to return to work. And I could not do that on my own power. I could not do that by my own source of strength. I had to surrender it to God, and I had to ask Him for understanding. I needed to know why it could happen, and I needed to know what was going to happen with my wife and I in the future. I had no idea. And so I had to seek Him who knows all. I had to seek Him who gives all, because I didn't create myself. I didn't create this moment. I don't believe God created the moment either, but I believe that it was necessary to be able to partner with Him in spirit to be able to walk through my grief moment. It was necessary for Him to cure my depression, my wife's depression, and to bring us to a moment to where we could conceive again. I could not do that without the hand and the touch and the power of God. We have to submit to something greater than ourselves to restore our sanity. The third step in Alcoholics Anonymous that I believe is parallels identically is that you have to make a decision to turn your will and your lives over to the care of God as we understand God. Absolutely. That's written plain, and it was inscribed upon my heart. You have to make a decision to turn your will over to God to be able to grow into the new future that He's prepared for you and that He prepared for my wife and I. If it was by my will, I know that I probably would have went after the clinic. I probably would have got to the moment to where I took my own life. If I did not turn my will over to God, I would not have been able to manage my own thoughts. I would not have been able to manage my own darkness and my own brokenness. No, it was like He put us on a cloud. I'll remember it in 2014. It was like he put us on a bed of His own covering, like a father would tuck in their child. That's exactly how my best description for you as to how I was able to walk through the rest of that year, was able to carry on with work, was able to support my wife as best as she could while she was going through the darkest moment of her life as well. She had to recover from a pregnancy and from a birth where she couldn't have that child with her. She had to recover physically. She had to recover mentally. She had to recover spiritually, as well as I did. But there was a different recovery for her in the sense that it was a holistic recovery that she had to go through without the reward and the benefit of that child. And there was no way that we could do that without the power and the source of Him who created us. And so we had to make a decision to turn our lives over to Him, because it was every step that He guided us through that year that allowed us to be able to conceive on Father's Day in 2014, to have our beautiful daughter just 1 year, almost 1 year afterwards, in February of 2015. It was our miracle baby, Violet. Came right after Nehemiah did, but it was by the hand and the touch of God. You have to be able to turn your life over to Him, and He will restore you. He will. That I am proof positive. That is my testimony, that He will restore you in that moment. Number 4 is that you have to, in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's made a search and fearless moral inventory of yourself. The grief parallel to this step, in my experience, is that you have to become emotionally intelligent. You have to embrace your feelings. You have to generate boundaries. You have to suffer through your mourning process. You have to yell. You have to cry when you want to cry. You have to scream when you need to scream. Mute yourself when you need to mute yourself. Go on a drive, write, etc. Whatever it is that helps you through your mourning process, whatever your body is telling you to do, whatever your mind is telling you to do, whatever your spirit is telling you to do, you have to embrace that. You have to be able to do an inventory, daily inventory of yourself. Sometimes it was living second by second, sometimes minute by minute, sometimes hour by hour, and you have to embrace the full process of your mourning experience. I remember that sometimes it would be music that I would be listening to, and I would just rock back and forth listening to that music as it was working to bring me joy to my spirit. Sometimes it was screaming. Oh my God, it was crying. But you have to be able to embrace your mourning process, and you have to be able to express it as your whole body and your emotions are telling you to express it. That's what's going to allow you to walk through the process fully, is not avoiding those feelings, not running from those feelings, but actually walking through all of those feelings. Be emotionally intelligent and focus on the well-being of walking through your complete mourning process. Don't be afraid of it, but experience it. All of grief's responses should be welcomed and forfeited as you uniquely see fit. Moving on to number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. The grief parallel to this is forgive yourself, forgive God, and forgive all others involved. Forgiveness of yourself, of God, and all others involved is a critical process to moving towards acceptance and grief. For me, I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive my perceived neglectfulness in 2013. I had to forgive myself for not being ready as a man, not feeling ready enough as a man to be able to be a father with my firstborn child, so much so that it affected the way I was in my relationship with Tangerine. It affected the way that I was in. It affected my engagement with the entire conception process. I was afraid. I was afraid to become a father. I was afraid to take that step, not knowing that God trusted me enough that he gave me Nehemiah. He gave us Nehemiah. But yet I doubted myself. I doubted my ability to be able to fully embrace the role of fatherhood. And I was afraid that I was going to mess it up. And that affected my engagement in the process. And that's something that I will forever regret. But I had to forgive myself if I was going to move forward. I had to forgive God. I asked God in my grieving process, I asked him why he would take my firstborn son. I was a faithful servant of his. I was serving in his church. At the time, I was doing everything that I knew that I thought I was supposed to be doing to be a good Christian. I was reading my Bible. I was going to church. I was serving in his church. I was praying. Yet this traumatic thing happened, and it was a crisis of my faith. I had to be able to forgive God, to be able to allow God to come in and heal my family. To heal Tangerine, to heal her body, to heal her mind, to heal her soul, to be able to heal my mind, to be able to heal my soul and mend my heart so that we can be in a position to be parents again, to experience the uniquenesses of a new baby again, and to not carry all of this resentment with us. There had to be forgiveness of God. And I had to forgive him and allow him to be able to come in and restore us. And forgive all others involved. I had to forgive the clinic, and I had to forgive the doctor who missed the fact that on the 35-week ultrasound image that there was a picture of the cord around. I had to forgive. I had to forgive that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to move forward. In grief, forgiveness is critical if you are to experience the joy of the memories that you had with the individual whom you loved, who you've now lost. Forgiveness. Next, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. But the grief parallel to that, it comes directly from the Bible. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, it says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new." Trust God through faith and works. And behold, because your redemption is coming. Ready to have God make you a new creation. The Bible tells us that we are new, that anybody who is in Christ is new. Old things pass away. In my experience, allowing God to take the reins is what was able to carry us through into a new birthing process. Literally, we had to go through a surgery. Not only healing from depression, but we had to go through a surgery of my wife's womb. And God paired us with a specialist doctor who was able to do that. But he came out and he told me anybody else would have taken her uterus. There was a specific touch from God. There was a miracle from God that happened. And after the surgery, it only took 3 weeks for us to conceive again. If you allow him to, he will restore you. That is my testimony. That if nothing else happens in my life, the way that he was able to do that for me and for my wife, nobody can tell me that God doesn't exist. We have to humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. I had to be able to have courage to be able to become a father. I had to know and trust that I had enough love in me and engagement in me to be a good dad. And so God removed those shortcomings. And now I have two beautiful daughters that God has blessed my wife and I with. 6 and 2. They just had birthdays this month. Make a list of all the persons that we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. With grief, again, it's forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of God, and forgiveness of any others that are involved. Number 9 says, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. For grief, it's give in to grief's selfish ambitions. Mend broken relationships. I think if this has taught me anything, this experience has taught me anything, is that we need each other. We need each other. We need our communities. We need our families. We need our friends. And that life is too short to harbor any anger towards anybody in your community. If you have to forgive somebody, forgive that person. Because life is too short. Tomorrow is definitely not promised. And relationships are important to our own support circles. Mend any broken relationship that you have while you have the time. Experience the joy and the fullness of each other. Don't subject yourself to any abuse. But if you can mend a relationship, mend it while you have the time to. Continue to take personal inventory. And when we're wrong, promptly admit that you're wrong. Grief comes in waves. So we have to make sure that we're continuing to suffer through your process and embrace triggers and conditions as they come. Anybody who is grieving now, or anybody who has experienced grief, knows well that it's like a roller coaster. Some days you'll be fine, but then something can happen that can remind you of a memory or trigger you into an emotional response that you had that kind of jumpstarts you back into the darkest times of your grief process. And as those low times come in grief, you have to step back in these steps and experience again, have the emotional intelligence enough to experience again your mourning process. Surrender to it. Walk through that pain, because there is light on the other side. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our consciousness contact with God as we understand Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And then lastly, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message in our lives and share our story and these principles in all of our affairs. We have to share our story because it's the hope and the recovering of our stories that help all those who are grieving today, and many are grieving today. Share your story. It's part of the externalization process. It's part of the forgiving process. It's part of moving forward, is being able to share your story. Living without a newborn child, it requires these coping techniques. I say living in grief requires these coping techniques as well. These are some of the learned experiences that I share in my new memoir, Columbia Avenue. And just remember, grief is simply the byproduct of love that we carry for those who we hold dear. So remember, in your suffering of grief, it comes from the love that we've experienced. That love is a beautiful thing. It has meaning. And so I say, give it the meaning that it deserves. Suffer through it, But know that Christ has the ability, that God has the ability to make all things new and to restore you to your fullest joy. That's my prayer for you. That's his blessings. That's the blessings that he truly has given us. I love you dearly. And if you want a copy, if you haven't been able to get a copy, just know it's out there on Kindle. It's print on demand for a paperback copy. That link is in my bio as well. And like I said, the response has just been unbelievable. It's actually going to be published to Apple iBooks this coming March. Starting on Monday, it will be on Apple iBooks. And I'm actually producing an audiobook through Audible. It will be through Amazon Audible here soon. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. This is me signing off for now, but not forever. Love you dearly.